How's it going? I'm your host, Mitchell Bernstein,
And I'm your co-host, Logan Liffick.
and you're listening to the Undesigned Podcast. This week, we spoke with Ethan Barber. He's currently a designer at D3 NYC in the Tribeca area near the World Trade Center. Previously, a graphic artist for the recently acquired Whole Foods Market. In this episode, we covered his journey into the design industry after recently graduating college. We talked to him about imposter syndrome and Ethan's number one tip for new designers and those looking for a job. And before we get started, I want to mention our awesome sponsor, NodeHost. If you're ready to launch your own custom website, NodeHost is a beautiful and powerful web hosting service with great support and not to mention really affordable pricing. I use them myself, so I know they're good. And you should too. Check them out at nodehost.ca. Now, let's get into it. How's it going, Ethan?
Good. How are you?
Very good. Logan?
I'm doing well, Mitch. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. So, as tradition, as you know, you're very familiar with now, Ethan.
Yes.
The question to you, the very first question is, what are you drinking?
I am enjoying a pumpkin ale by local Brooklyn brewery. So tis the season to be fallsy.
Again?
What do you mean again? It's the first time.
There wasn't a second recording to this.
Are you saying this is fake?
This is truly the most real it could possibly be.
Seriously.
Logan.
I am partaking in water. My favorite
Being
drink.
healthy.
Absolutely.
I see. Oh, I hear. Can't really see.
What
No,
about you,
Mitch, what about you? No.
I am drinking the South Africa, the Reserve Bank Western Cape Red Blend. I've absolutely no idea what this means. Product of South Africa. Like I said before the podcast officially started, in the first cut, my parents got this as a gift from their friends that just are visiting from England. I don't know how my parents know people from England, but I guess that's cool. So, Ethan, this isn't about wine. This is about you. This is about
this
whole
about
podcast
me.
is us interviewing you.
Oh, God.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited. But a little bit about me. I am a graphic designer based in New York City. More specifically, I currently work for a creative agency in Tribeca, and that's about half mile from the World Trade Center for you all, Orlando Indians and anybody else who's not familiar. But yeah, I live up in North Jersey, and I commute down to the city every day, and I love it. I also have a small, I wouldn't call it a side business yet, but I kind of run my Instagram as like a brand. And I get to do like small partnerships, and brands kind of like sponsor me to post their content, which is really cool. And most recently, I got to work with Simply Gum, and yeah, it was really fun.
So, where were you before where you are now?
I was at brunch. No, I'm just kidding. I actually grew up in Central Jersey, and I moved down to Orlando for school. I went to Full Sail University, and actually, Mitch, that's where I met you. Was where did we meet? I think it was an AIGA meeting or something.
It was. Oh gosh, did you go to Creative South with us?
No, I was not about that one.
No. Then I don't know. I don't remember. It must have been at some AIGA meeting with our group that we formed.
Yeah. Something like it clearly was not memorable for either of us. So
it was at the what was that office in the Exchange Building in Orlando?
Oh, I don't remember.
Power DMS. I think it was at one of the meetings there.
It may have been, and then I remember there was that bar down the street that we hung out at.
It was the Iron Yard.
Iron Yard. That's it.
Yeah, they hosted a bunch of the AIGA meetings. Logan, I don't know if you ever been to the Iron Yard. Have you?
I have not. I keep hearing about different meetings that are hosted there, and it's like always the meetings that I'm not able to attend. So I've never.
Yeah, you gotta be
actually
able
gotten
to
over
attend
there.
one of them. It's a nice little place. They teach coding for designers and other people, developers.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool company.
Yeah, no, they're great. They're awesome. They host a lot of the AIGA meetings, which is even cooler.
Yeah.
And and I think we met there and we hung out a lot. Went to the bars. Saw Stephanie trip over a fence. That was pretty funny.
That was a good time. Actually, fun fact, that night was the first night I ever got a parking ticket because I was, and I think you'll remember this, I was 13 minutes late to my car, and the cop decided to give me a $54 ticket because, 13 minutes is very life-changing in Orlando. So,
ouch.
Yeah. I don't think I went to an AIGA meeting after that because it scarred me. In Orlando, not ever, but you know what I mean.
Logan.
Yo.
Are you heavily involved in AIGA or lightly involved or semi-involved?
I would consider myself lightly involved. I applied for the mentorship this year. That's about the extent of my involvement. I've been to one meeting.
Are you going to be like in it, or you haven't heard back
I'm
yet?
in it.
Nice.
Oh, sweet!
Congratulations!
In the mentorship, or wait, hang on.
Reeling back.
Not the mentorship yet. No, I don't know the result of that yet. The application came out like a few days ago.
Gotcha.
So I just applied. I'm an AIGA. I'm going to be a part of AIGA.
Right. Okay, so then you're soon to be due for whenever the mentorship opens up, if you get it in.
Yeah. So,
which you will.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
I'm adamant about that. So, is there a larger chapter that you're involved with up in, where are you at exactly again? You said New Jersey or New York? Where are you now?
So right now I live in North Jersey, like right on the Hudson River across from New York City.
Right.
I really love living in New Jersey. I was born and raised here, and I moved up to North Jersey just because cost of living is a little bit cheaper. So it's just nicer. And honestly, I love seeing a little bit of Jersey trash on the weekends. So go to the mall, be a little bit suburban, and not have to take the subway everywhere. I really enjoy my car rides.
So, are you involved in the AIJ that's up there or no?
I really haven't had time to be honest. I would love to, and I think a lot of my social circles up here have been a lot more social media and Instagram based. So I've done a lot of meetups with influencers and other photographers and stuff. And actually, I've found a lot of connections into the design community through that because I feel like, at least in my experiences, a lot of designers tend to love kind of doing photography, or some of them even are more like, they do music on the side. And it's kind of cool to see when you kind of, form a friendship or connection with someone through a different medium. And then they're like, oh, and I work full time as a designer. I'm like, oh, I do that too. That's, kind of cool. So I just haven't had a chance to, but I would like to at some point just kind of hit up the AIGA New York and, get connected with some of the people up here.
So, before we started the podcast, I had a couple of questions, notes, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
About what I should ask you, and we discussed this, and I discussed it with Logan, and it's kind of hard because you're our first guest, and I'm trying to figure out how to structure these podcasts with Logan. So somebody asked me to ask you.
Oh, okay.
What have you learned in your career? What do you know now that you didn't know before? I guess I'll extend that question to say, what do you know now that you didn't learn in school or couldn't learn in school, being in in a professional career?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, for me, I think it's a really good question. I think for me, it's been a little bit interesting because I'm only about a year and a half into my career, almost 2 years now. I'm not a seasoned veteran by any means, but I think something that I learned and I've picked up on that was not really taught in school, and I don't think you can teach this in school, but it's just kind of how to dance your way a little bit around a corporate structure and, really picking up kind of the social cues. It's one thing to be a designer or an artist or, any type of a, dare I say, creative in, a company. And I think a lot of times at school, it's important because you're paying to be there and you're paying to learn your craft and, to build your skill set so that you can get a job. But sometimes I think, at least in my experience, something that I didn't pick up as much was kind of the people skills and the project management skills that, are definitely just as important, if not almost more important than you know, your skill set, because you can be extremely talented, but if you can't, you know, produce what you need to produce when it's due, or manage your timeline or whatever it is, you're not going to be successful. And I'm lucky enough now in my current job, I actually have a project manager. I have a team of project managers. I just have one that I deal with directly, and it's extremely helpful and conductive to my workflow because it's just easier to have someone who directly deals with clients or people who put in requests for whatever it is. He deals with them. He tells me, hey, here's your brief, here's the questions, do you have any questions, this is when we need it due by, make it happen. So I'm in a really good spot now. I think I've worked in a role before where I didn't have that, where I was kind of directly project managing my own stuff. And, I definitely learned skills on kind of how to manage my own time. But, it was just something that, I'm still learning every day. And I wouldn't say I have a full grasp on my own project management, but I would say that's one thing that I've definitely learned in, my short experience so far in being a designer that I would say is really important.
All right, that's wow. Did not expect that answer. I thought it would be more um, geared towards the craft itself. I'm glad you spoke about the project management and navigating
cool.
through the companies. What social cues are you referring to? Because I've being worked at IBM. Logan, you worked at what's the company? Reservations.
Reservations, yeah.
Both. I don't know if I would call Reservations corporate, but I would call it a large startup, which could equate to being corporate in a way.
Yep. I'd label it as a startup.
Mm-hmm.
So, what social cues are you referring to?
I think when I say social cues, I kind of mean just understanding how to work with different personality types and being able to, especially when you're in a role that you don't have the luxury of having a project manager or a president or a creative director who is able to kind of manage your stuff for you and kind of direct you. I think it's really important to be able to identify, cues from people that when you're showing someone who maybe necessarily doesn't understand design from a what's the word I'm looking for, from like a critical level, someone who's able to kind of look at something objectively and kind of pick it apart and understand basics like hierarchy, composition, that kind of stuff, basic color theory. Being able to read through people's personalities. Some people are people like myself. I am painfully friendly and nice to people even when I'm annoyed at them because it's just how I'm kind of wired as a human, whereas some people just are more introverted and they don't like talking. So just being able to kind of navigate different personality types who might have a say in the work that you're producing, and understanding that things aren't an attack on what you did, or maybe you executed something in a really beautiful way but it doesn't communicate what your client needed. So in a way, just being able to maneuver and understand that, when you're, creating stuff, that there's going to be 100 different voices that go into whatever you're making, and just kind of being able to take the important info from that to be able to apply it to your revisions so that you can cut it down from having, 48 revisions to only 7, or sometimes people see a direction that you were going with the design and it actually changes their idea that they originally had. And instead of gearing it back towards what they want, they'll actually push you in a different direction, and being able to reel them back in and say, hey, I can do that, but that's something completely different. And this is what you originally requested. So, just kind of understanding those different balances and being able to kind of, make sure that you're being productive while also being able to, fulfill what different people need.
So, like I said before, us, all three of us being at semi-big, large, or corporate structures, have to know how to work with other people. My manager, Devin O'Brien, unbelievably talented designer, and even more talented project manager. Honestly, he was incredible. He told us this. You have to understand how to navigate other people's bullshit.
Yep.
That was kind of the theme to that, which correlates directly to what you're saying. I mean, I totally hear you. If you don't understand a person, their personality, their kind of quirks, their yeses and nos, kind of what their goals are, and really them. If you don't understand them, you will understand how to work with them. You understand what to do when things go sour, how they're going to react, how do you save that relationship and make sure that the project succeeds regardless of whatever failures go on. So I totally hear you there. And is there an example of that where you had to figure that out and maybe you succeeded or failed?
Oof. I'm sure there is. Just like right off the top of my head, I don't have like a specific thing. I would say though that like it's just, I think context is key. I'm gonna pivot a little bit because I don't have an example, but adding on to it, I think that I think context is key in terms of when a situation like that arises. I always find it's more helpful for me to understand the context of the project. So I kind of want to know more about what the goal is rather than what I'm actually making. Like, actually, here's a great example. I work at this creative agency. Right now, I've been doing a lot of like emails and paid social assets, and more recently, I've been working on a lot of the assets for their holiday campaign and stuff. So there's different projects that I've gotten a chance to work on, and there was a specific one where I don't think I can talk about it in specifics, but basically the project came down, and it was kind of a weird request, but it was very similar to some of the work I've done at Whole Foods. And they asked me to, because they were like, oh, you have experience, doing something like this. Can you make something? And I was a little confused because I knew what to do, but I was like, I'm not really sure how you're going to apply this specific, packaging to this product. And so I was able to ask my project manager to kind of contact the marketing person who requested this piece. And I was like, can you have them give me a little bit more context and help me understand kind of like, what exactly they want out of this? What is this trying to communicate? What am I trying to help the customer understand by, consuming this? And he came back to me and gave me a bit like a better vision. And I understood. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and stuff like that. So I think just even understanding the context around the projects you're working on really can help you when you go to make that execution and you kind of creatively are trying to think of, all right, well, what's the best solution to this? How can I take, the toolkit that I work out of? How can I take the brand and push it in a way that fits within it, but also, is a little bit clever or maybe, makes people think a little bit more. So it was just kind of an interesting way because when it came down, I was like, this doesn't really make sense. Like I can do what they're asking, but for the purpose of it, it just doesn't fit. So it was interesting to kind of see that process happen.
Yeah. That was a really cool response. I like that. Just really looking at it from a technical level. But Ethan, I've got a question for you that sort of steps back from that, just
Sure.
for some of our audience that may be of that collegiate level about to make that transition. But what was your life like about I don't know, maybe like 2 to 3 months before graduation? Like, what were you thinking job wise? Where did you want to end up? What goals did you have in mind then that may have changed now? Just that sort of mindset that you were in is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, sure. A few months before graduation, I was freaking out. Um, I actually it was a pretty intense time. For those who don't know, Full Sail is a kind of an accelerated school, so you get your bachelor's degree in 21 months rather than 4 years. So you go
Right.
to school full time. So I was in class for 40 hours a week, plus I worked two part-time jobs. So I was working retail at Old Navy on the weekends, and then I would actually I would hold labs open at Full Sail for students to study. So the Full Sail job was a little bit killing two birds with one stone, because I was able to get homework done and work on schoolwork while working technically.
Right.
So my days were pretty much, super long, and it was just kind of grind time. And I always like I really honestly I didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated. I always knew that um, I admired people like Johnny Ive at Apple, and just kind of Apple in general was always I mean, I'm an Apple fanboy, and I know Apple isn't the holy grail of design forever, but it was just one of those things. Like, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Steve Jobs, and just Apple's attention to quality and detail. I definitely was inside of kind of the little dribble bubble that happens at school, I think, where when you're in
Hmm.
school, it's like if you're not on dribble and you're not posting shots every 2 days, it's like, why are you even here? And so I definitely got caught up in the whole like, ooh, I'm going to do some line work and some flat vector stuff. Um, but as I got closer to graduation, I did kind of have quite a few moments where I was like, I just don't know. I knew I wanted to do design. I knew I wanted to continue my photography. And I really was just kind of, I just wanted to work, and I wanted to be done with, with school. And that's not to say I don't want to ever stop learning. I consider myself always in a state of learning, and, I try to, I try to learn something new every day. Otherwise I get really annoyed with myself. But as I got closer to, I graduated in March, and I'd say after I came back from Christmas break, it was kind of like, all right, so the next time you're going to be in New Jersey, you're either not going to have a job or what, because, you're graduating in March and you're not going to be back. And it kind of, for me, was like a turning point where I was like, okay, shit, this is getting real. I need to figure this out. So I kind of mass applied to places. I actually had an interview with Kohl's in New York, because growing up, I always wanted to work and live in New York City. And that's always been a dream of mine. And that'll kind of play out into where I'm at now. But when I was in school, I actually got an interview with Kohl's and their design studio that's in the city. And they do a lot of the like celebrity collections. So like Jennifer Lopez, Mark Anthony, Martha Stewart, I believe. Don't quote me on that last one, but like there's different celebrities that have like lines of clothing and products. So this studio specifically did the packaging, and they worked directly with them because I think the rest of Kohl's as a company is based in the Midwest. Um, so that was interesting, because that was actually my first like professional interview where they looked at my portfolio, and I mean, it went okay. It didn't get past the second interview, but it was still kind of cool. But it was also nerve wracking, because I'm sitting here like trying to go for jobs and trying to get a website up and trying to figure out my brand and trying to figure out, am I going to stay in Florida? What am I going to do? And, I definitely had a lot of anxiety. Not going to like that period. I remember having a lot of late nights sitting up, being anxious, and just not knowing where the future was going to go. Um, and so I, made my way up to graduation. I'd like to put out that I did apply at Urban Outfitters, and I got rejected twice, which was great. I was like, okay, thanks, Urban. But ironically, they have used my photography multiple times on their website, and even for one of their marketing campaigns in store last year, it was one of their clearance campaigns. They had me sign a release for like two of my photos. So it's like weird, because it's like they were like, yeah, we don't want you, but we'll use your photography. So I'm like, okay, cool. But when I got to graduation, it was a little nerve wracking, because I think there was one or two people in my class who like had a job lined up, and I was not one of them. And I graduated, I got my site launched, and I ended up getting a job at Starbucks for 2 months because I knew the owner of the Starbucks right down by the school on Forsyth, I think. And she's such a super cool person. Her name's Sarah Patterson, and she actually was one of the few people that like I was weirdly enough able to talk to about my anxiousness post graduation. And she was like, Ethan, look, she's like, if you're looking for a job and you need something full time, she's like, I can bring you on the team for a month, 2 months, whatever you need, just so that you can support yourself and live here. She's like, I don't want you to feel like there's nothing, like you don't have that. So it was really cool because she ended up bringing me on the team for 2 months. So I did the typical college student works as a barista moment. And then I kept applying to places, and I ended up, randomly enough, I was grocery shopping one Sunday night, and I ended up in Whole Foods because that's where I consume almost all my food. And I ended up talking to one of the workers on the floor, and I mentioned that I was looking for a job, and they were like, well, hey, we have a store graphic artist position opening up in our store in Orlando. And I was like, wait, what? And one thing led to another. I applied, and I went through the interview process. I talked to about 6 or 7 people, and then they brought me in for an interview, and I got that position in May of 2016. So I went from graduation to a little bit of an intern period, and then I went to Whole Foods to work as a graphic artist, and that was pretty exciting. I got to support the Orlando store that's in between Universal and Disney. I was the graphic artist there for just over a year, or just under a year. It was from May to March of this past year. And basically I was kind of in charge of, the signage in the store, doing all the chalkboards. I did t-shirts, bags, mailers, a bunch of different marketing materials, social assets. And it was really interesting because to go directly from school into a retail job again, because like I went from, being in class all the time to working full time at Starbucks, I got really discouraged. But I never stopped looking. And I always knew, because I had such a core group of friends that, really held me accountable. And, my friend Matt Faller, Maddie Rowe, Britta, Sison, they were kind of my core group, Mitch, obviously. But, there was kind of a core group of people that really held me accountable and made sure that I didn't get discouraged to the point where I gave up. And, a lot of people, weirdly enough, kind of wrote me off, I think. And when news got out that like I got a job at Starbucks, like right after graduation, weirdly enough, people were like, oh, Ethan just went and got a job working retail. And I was like, well, I kind of need to live. So, my dad's not paying for shit. So I got to do something. And I grinded. I worked on weekends on my portfolio. Like I never stopped. I kept putting out content. I kept hitting people up, just doing whatever it took. And
I remember.
Yeah, it was a really rough period because there were definitely points where I was not sure what was going to happen. All I knew is that, well, life goes on and there's no way I'm going to not have a job at some point. Like if you keep working for something, you're eventually going to get it. It's how life works. Unless you are absolutely terrible, like, at some point, one thing or another is going to line up. And I think going from that to directly to a full-time job where I wasn't like I had a creative director, but I didn't really work with her directly the whole time. I mean, clearly I had to work within brand guidelines, but on the day-to-day, when you're in a grocery store and people come to you and they're like, I need this right now, you don't have time to send it through a process of approval. Like it's really up to you to be able to make that decision that this is within the brand standards. And other people did look at it, like my marketing coordinator and my Metro store artist, and they would give me feedback. But a lot of times, like when you're in a grocery store, they needed it yesterday. and you kind of got to like produce this content and just get it out there right away. And it was interesting because a lot of my friends, like, I went through that weird 2 month period of nothing, and then I went right into a full time graphic design job. And a lot of my friends were like kind of in internships, or they were in the same boat. And it was a very interesting dynamic because I didn't have an internship process. I didn't have a chance to, well, not a chance, but like I didn't work for a company for free under the pretense of you're getting experience. And my experience was very different in the sense that Whole Foods as a company, if you will, trusted me right out of school with no experience to run one of their stores graphically. And that makes it sound better than it actually was, but kind of in a nutshell, like they entrusted that store underneath kind of my creative judgment. And it's a lot of responsibility. And it was such an interesting dynamic.
So from there,
Mm-hmm.
what happened in Whole Foods? Where'd you go?
So I worked there for the holidays up until till Christmas, and what happened was I absolutely love Whole Foods. Like I love the company, and working there was so much fun. Like not it was stressful at times, but it was fun. And I just wasn't happy. And Florida for me, as a person who was born and raised in the Northeast, who's used to seasons, I ended up getting really
Shut up.
depressed. No, I'm yeah. How are you enjoying Florida, Mitch? I really got depressed, and I was torn because I loved my job. I loved what I got to do every day. I mean, I commuted an hour to work, but I woke up every morning excited to go to work because I loved it. And I just knew that I wasn't going to be happy staying in Florida. So a position actually opened up in the Northeast region, in the regional office. So it's like the corporate side rather than the retail side. And I don't know what came over me, but I just felt kind of crazy that day. And it was January 29th that I got the email, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. And I applied for it, and I contacted the creative director at the time, Justine, and I hit her up and I was like, hey, I'm an artist at the Orlando store. I haven't been here that long, but, I really love it. I grew up in the Northeast. I would love to, set up a phone call with you if you're interested to talk more about the position. I hit her up, and she responded like within 2 hours, and we set up a phone call, and like a week later I had an interview. And then that interview got delayed because of a snowstorm, because that's a logical and reasonable excuse up here.
But eventually you got the job.
And it was crazy because it was happening. And so I took it, and I moved up here in April, and I worked there for a few months, and then one thing kind of led to another. And I mean, I loved it. It was great. I got to work with so many really talented people, and especially the artists, like the store graphic artists in this region. I mean, the Florida region is great, but up here, the artists are just so passionate, and they work really hard. And there are some really talented people on the team up here that just really, as artists, separate from Whole Foods and just in their own careers, they're incredible at what they do, and stuff. But I was kind of in that role for a few months, and then one thing kind of led to another, and I ended up getting an offer from this agency in Tribeca, and I could not refuse it, so I took it. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
Wow. Wow. So you went from not knowing
Logan,
what
I
was
hope
going to
that
happen.
answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, above and beyond, man.
Like you went from not knowing to then skyrocketing, and now you're living the life.
I guess so. I mean, when you put it that way, it makes me feel really uncomfortable. But yeah, I guess so. I'm like, am I?
But it's true. I knew you before you had any of these jobs, and then you became what you are today, which I'm so proud of you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I'm proud of you.
Oh.
I get to tell people. Hold on for a minute. I get to tell people that, yeah, it's cool, whatever, I do this, but like do you know my friend Mitch? And then they're like, who? And I'm like, all right, well, let me tell you. And I usually start off with that with people. I'm like, do you know my friend? And then because nobody's going to know, I love just like having that opportunity. And I love telling people, I'm like, well, he's getting ready to graduate. So just like prefacing that he's still a student, but he has already done so many cool things. He already has, a really awesome job lined up. He has a podcast. He created an app. He's already working on a second one. He's done just so many different things. He won Adobe Creative Jam. And like people are like, wow. And I'm like, yeah, see, I'm cool by association because I have cool friends. So therefore I'm cool too, right?
Well, first of all, I couldn't have done two of the things, the podcast or Creative Jam, without my buddy Logan. Could not have done that. Like literally, like I don't think I could have done that. Like I would have gone insane doing either of these two things. So, yeah, Logan. So, from your perspective, you're not even. Well, you're close to graduating. You're graduating. When did you say spring?
Yeah, spring 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, job wise, how do you feel?
I feel confident. I wouldn't say like overly excited, but I feel like I've prepared myself to a level where I'm able to find what I'm looking for, especially right after graduation. Um, and I'd say that that's not entirely my biggest concern. I'd say
What
my
is your
biggest
biggest
concern is more so location.
Mm.
Whether it's staying in this city, somewhere else in Florida, possibly somewhere else in the country,
World.
yeah, in the world. And that's more so like trying to find my scope of like
Mhm.
what I'm looking for after graduation. Um, but the other day, I had an interview with a place because I'm shopping around now that my internship is ending. And I was offered a full-time position once I graduate, but
Whoop, whoop.
I mean, I
Get it,
definitely
boy.
still want to explore my options.
Yeah.
So it's like just sort of like trying to see like if I'm going too far with exploring, if I'm not going far enough, like really like taking those steps backward to be able to see the big picture, but then thinking about it and creating like a tactic to see if I'm stepping too far backward,
Mm.
if that makes
What
any sense.
what I've found is that we don't think big when we're leaving college. Some of us do, and we apply. Like those people really do reach for things that might just be a little bit out of their range, or might just be kind of like a miracle, but chances are much higher if you start applying to those. And what I found is that from speaking to a couple of professors, a lot of students don't feel confident reaching out, applying to things that might intimidate them.
Right.
I know some of our students have applied to massive, I mean, extremely well known companies and have gotten in and have gotten rejected. But I know people from Full Sail, they've went far and long in their careers. They're at great companies now. They're
Mm.
working and they're doing great work, whether they're on their own freelance or they are working for a company or they've made their own company, in both UCF and Full Sail. And I've actually started reaching out to other schools and other uh, programs or clubs within schools to see how some of those individuals, those student leaders or future designers
Mm.
uh, anticipate their careers and where they're going to go, and to see if we can open a dialogue between all these schools, because we are this one generation of designers that is going to have an extraordinary impact based on everything learned in the past, 30, 40 years, especially in our industries, but
Yeah.
in advertising, marketing, user experience, we are kind of the assimilation, not the assimilation, uh, we're the sum of everything known. Like
Yeah.
all the knowledge is in us now. And it's
Okay.
surprising that because of that, most kids are still not confident enough in applying and thinking bigger.
Hmm.
Do you agree?
Ethan or Logan?
Either.
Logan,
Ethan, you
I'll
want
let
to go
you
first?
go.
Oh, all
No,
right.
Logan,
All
you go.
right.
I've talked a lot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that like students really have this sort of like, I wouldn't say down in the mouth kind of look, but like they don't really look as far as they possibly can. I mean, it's a daunting task. Like you're not asking something easy, but I mean, it's like trying to get your mindset into like I could be anything. I could go anywhere. Like, sort of even that like imposter syndrome kind of
Mm-hmm.
feeling of like, am I good enough? Like that sort
Can
of mindset. But
can you explain what imposter syndrome is?
yeah, sure. So imposter syndrome, I have no idea where it originated. I feel like it's a newer term. But anyway, it's that feeling that you get when either you don't feel good enough about who you are as a designer or like putting yourself out there as much as you could because you feel like other people are better and in a way that you would feel that you're an imposter by calling yourself a professional when I guess comparing yourself to others in the industry.
Ethan, have you ever felt imposter syndrome?
I don't think so. I don't.
No?
Hmm.
When I was at IBM, the first day started. Like we got there on Sunday. We got to the office on a Sunday. They walked us around, gave us a tour, and then Monday comes around and they said, "All right, you've already had the tour. You know where everything is, so we're going to start today. Like we're going to give you your first project. Or the guests are coming in. You're just going to speak to these clients, and then you're going to start making." And the minute I started talking to these people, I think one was from Princeton, one was from RISD, and you know, grand schools within art and design. Some of them were from New York, some of them were from Austin and Texas abroad, uh, Georgia, wherever. And from just speaking to these kids, I felt like I was the stupidest one in the building. I honestly felt like I had nothing to offer compared to these kids. And they were so beyond brilliant. And I'm so proud of what we were able to achieve together. But that first day, I felt like, I think the first week, I felt like I was the stupidest one in the room. And I can honestly say that I don't think anyone was stupid in that room, including myself. But
Well, yeah. I I will say I misunderstood that, and when Logan, when you were talking, I kind of misunderstood what you meant. I have definitely, if not almost every single day of my life, feel that syndrome. So I'm like sitting here and I'm like, wow, I sounded like such an ass when I'm like, yeah, no, I've never experienced that. I totally misinterpreted how you were saying that. And I
No
thought you were
worries.
asking if other people felt that way. I don't know why, but I thought you meant if other people, and I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think anybody has ever felt intimidated by me ever. Um, but no, I like yes, yes. Even when you guys asked me to be on the podcast, I was having minor anxiety the whole time. Like,
oh
oh my
my
god,
God,
I do not. I'm like,
Logan,
what am I?
I can I
No.
can I can vouch for that. He texted me
Okay, we
like
don't have to do
like
this.
what do I say? I want to prepare myself. I don't know. I'm afraid if I screw up and look like an idiot. Oh my God.
Oh,
No,
that's what Mitch and his editing are for.
yeah, right. So people are going to hear a
Yeah.
lot of jump cuts when I talk. Apparently,
No, I think you're doing
We'll
great so
see. We'll
far.
see how far we get with that. Uh, but yeah, no, imposter syndrome. So you say you feel that every day?
I think to a level, yeah. I think where I I think it kind of branches into my theory that like I don't want to stop learning. I'll be real. Like let's get 100% real here. I spend a good majority of my free time watching YouTube videos, watching and not like you know brain expanding kind of video. Like I straight up will watch Trisha Paytas eat a box of donuts for 5 minutes, and sometimes that's just how I fill my free time. And I feel really insecure about it sometimes because I sit here and I'm like, well, I see so many talented and creative and successful people, whether or not they're designers or they're artists or they're in fashion, music, whatever. I'm really lucky to be surrounded by a lot of extremely talented people as friends, as colleagues, associates, whatever. And I wonder, like, what do they do in their free time? And a majority of people that talk to me have said, like, oh, I listen to podcasts in the car, I listen to NPR, I watch TED Talks, this, that, and the other thing. So I started to do that. I started to, instead of listening to, a new album that came out on the radio, instead of listening to that on my commute, I would put on, Undesigned, this great new podcast that just opened up, or, something else. Like I just would start, listening to podcasts. And when I moved from Florida to New York, my dad and I were trapped in a moving van with my cat for 22 hours, I think. And we ended up listening to TED Talks for like half the ride. And I slowly started to notice that, like, my understanding of topics really started to expand. And I was able to, like, start to digest more information. But I'm still not 100% there in terms of, like, I still, to this day, will watch an episode of The Kardashians or four on a Saturday afternoon because I just need my brain to, melt for a little bit. Like there's still times where I feel so much like an imposter because I put my design out there, I put my photography out there, I put myself out there. I've been building a brand based on my own name. I don't understand what that brand is yet, but it's still growing, and I want to have it proceed. But like sometimes I feel like I'm an imposter because I know that I have a level of influence over other people, and it's not like and that's not to say like, oh, I'm a role model or I'm important, but I do have a healthy following on Instagram. I do have friends that are my peers but also look up to me and come to me for advice, and that's the most humbling thing. But sometimes when I give advice or I critique something that they did, I feel like, am I an imposter because I'm not where I think I should be in life? So I think that's kind of what I mean by when I say I feel it almost every day is I almost guilt myself into not feeling like I'm enough at times as a designer, and to even call myself that, because I have so much respect for people that are, further on in their careers or who have, incredible portfolios, and not even like the